Writing a deployment plan. Deploying SharePoint is a lot like developing a custom software application. So as a SharePoint administrator, you need to understand the fundamentals of the software development lifecycle. The lifecycle is a set of phases that all development projects tend to go through. And let's look at those. You have planning. You must make a plan. That's key. Development. If there are any business requirements that SharePoint does not meet out of the box, then that needs to be developed. Review, testing, rollout, and support. The term lifecycle implies beginning, middle, and end, but it doesn't say how long each of those phases last. From a return on investment perspective, projects that move smoothly through the early phases and then have long lives in the support phase are usually ideal. A life cycle ends when the project is no longer needed, usually because it has been replaced by a newer, younger project. And so the cycle continues. Now let's take a peek at the planning stage. The first part of the life cycle is the planning phase. Software projects, such as SharePoint deployments, require a project plan. A defined plan helps you articulate shared goals, measure progress, and most importantly, tells you when you are done. Software development has come a long way in the last 30 years. And we now know what works and what doesn't. Specifically, attempts to predict everything in advance are wasted effort. Predictive approaches are susceptible to incorrect assumptions. Changes in technology and changes in the market or worse, management. These are all things that can totally derail your plan. Another item is reacting to changes as they appear means you never finish. Reactive approaches exercise no control, they consume resources, and leave everyone feeling drained, which is never a good thing. And by defining what you can predict and expecting some change, you can balance the need for order with the reality of the human world. This adaptive approach is widely acknowledged and the best approach to software development. SharePoint is well suited to an adaptive approach because it is possible to deliver features into the hands of users quickly for evaluation, get feedback, and make changes before distributing to a wider audience. That said, some aspects of SharePoint are very difficult to change after you deploy them. Those are the things you try to identify as part of the project plan. So what goes into a project plan? You want to create a project plan that includes the stakeholders. List the key decision makers, users, developers, and administrators for the SharePoint project. These are the folks who will contribute to the project and who can approve or seek approval for cost items, such as hardware and software. It should also include business needs. List the key needs that the project must meet. These are sometimes called goals, but needs may be preferable because it implies a direct benefit. Note that meeting needs is good, whereas exceeding needs is not. And then we have project description. Describe how the project will meet the business needs. State this in general terms, without a lot of technical detail. Be sure to address these key aspects: site structure, security, search, external access. And don't forget about end-user training. That's one of the key components to making sure that the users will adopt the product. Software requirements. List the Microsoft and add-on software that the servers will require, and separately list required software for clients that connect to the servers. The hardware requirements. List existing hardware that the project will use and include the general specifications for any new hardware that the project requires. And finally, schedule. Create a timeline for the key phases of the project. If you work for a medium or large company, you may have a business systems analyst who is a pro at creating project plans like this. However, you'll still probably be asked to contribute to the project description and requirement section. Now, let's move on to the development phase. When you deploy SharePoint initially, the development phase involves these following chores. Prepare the server. The server needs to be ready. Install the software that's needed. Configure the SharePoint features, but do keep in mind, only configure the features that are required by the business. And create the initial site structure and branding that's going to be applied. And of course, set site security. The business needs laid out in the project plan determine the decisions you make in these steps. Review phase. Once you've completed the development phase, you should review your work with the project stakeholders to obtain feedback and reach agreement that your work meets the business needs. A successful approach would be scheduling a group meeting with the project stakeholders to demonstrate the SharePoint sites and features using a large screen projector with you driving. Gather feedback and change requests from the meeting. Be sure to update the project plan if change requests are major and note them as changes. Make the requested changes, grant the stakeholders access to the SharePoint site, and ask that they review the changes. And finally, walk through the changes with the stakeholders. Schedule a final meeting to discuss the changes and get approval to move to the next phase. And keep in mind, steps 1 through 4, these 4 items that we've discussed here, should not repeat in an infinite loop. If it begins to feel that way, the business needs probably weren't stated clearly in the project plan. Make a note of that and try to do better next time. Remember that this is a human process and stuff happens. For the testing phase, once the review is complete, you can open the site to limited use to help identify problems that might occur before releasing it to a broad audience. Since the project stakeholders started using the system in the review phase, you can expand that audience to other key individuals, such as 1 or 2 power users in each department. If you work for a large company, you may want to test sites on a department-by-department basis. During the testing phase, watch for these specific problems. Client software issues. Does SharePoint interoperate with Office and other client applications correctly? Evaluate the security. Can users access what they need, but not what they shouldn't? Usability. Are the site structure and controls intuitive, or do they require explaining? And finally, errors. Are unexpected errors occurring on the server? Schedule a testing period to take 1 or 2 weeks at most, but if serious problems arise, take the time to fix them before the rollout. Now we're moving on to the rollout phase. The rollout phase is when all your hard work finally pays off. However, you still have quite a bit of hard work ahead of you. The primary tasks for rollout are identifying the site owners, train users and set user expectations, handle initial support requests, and monitor the server. In medium to large companies, you may want to roll out SharePoint on a department-by-department basis so you can build an internal power base of users to help answer common "how do I" questions. Now that we've completed all the prior phases, including rollout, we move on to the support phase. Once everyone is up and using SharePoint, you move to the support phase. You already performed most of the tasks in this phase in one form or another during development, review, and testing. However, some additional tasks often fall to SharePoint administrators. And those are, but not limited to, creating content types, creating templates, mail enabling lists, manage users' My Sites, create and manage quotas, how much content is going to be allowed in the farm, and of course using the STS-ADM command line utility and PowerShell. You may even be asked to train additional SharePoint administrators.